Morning, everyone. Anybody got a subject they want to talk about today? Thoughts? Opinions? Gripes? Complaints? I don't care about you. Well, it's good that I brought something with me then, because I can fill 45 minutes pretty easy. Let's start with prayer. Father, thank you this morning for Sunday school. Thank you for the desire of your people to come to Sunday school. Make this worthwhile, Lord. Touch them and their hearts and me and my mouth. Make this profitable for all of us in Jesus' name, and everyone said amen. Amen. Last week I left off with Horeb because I ran out of time. They had just left a party after crossing the Red Sea for a week. A week for the party, I should say. And now God is moving them again from the Red Sea. They go into the desert 3 days, and they anticipate they're going to run out of water and food, and they start complaining. 3 days, as Brian pointed out more than once. 3 days. 3 days, Tammy. And they had forgot what God was trying to teach them. I'm with you. But apparently the Israelites feel that God was with them as long as things are going good. When things aren't so good, their first reaction was noticeably not to turn to God and talk to him, but turn to Moses and complain. You brought us out here to die. That's what they accused him of. 3 days, Brian. 3 days. They forgot he delivered them from Egypt. They forgot that they plundered Egypt as they left. They forgot that he had provided an escape for them when there wasn't any. And he forgot, or they forgot, that he had provided for them all along up to this point. 3 days. They forgot a lot in a hurry. And now here we are. And in their grumbling and complaining to Moses, they don't seem to realize, or maybe they don't care, they're really complaining and grumbling to God. But the interesting thing that I need you to realize or remember in this is God didn't react to their complaining. He didn't take offense to it. He didn't come on to them and say, well, fine, if you don't want me around, I'll leave. And also, let me remind you, physically, he was in front of them with a pillar of fire at night and cloud during the day. So they could not only feel God's presence, they could see God's presence. But it didn't stop them. Isn't it interesting how bold you can become when you're upset with God? And aren't you thankful that God doesn't become bold with you when you're upset with God? Otherwise, I doubt if most of us would be here. Some of what we're going to read today takes that into account again. You know the story, or at least I hope you do in Horeb. They finally get to water. Doesn't taste good. Moses is able to fix that by putting wood in the water. And I had someone point out to me this week that I didn't know this, wormwood will purify water. So maybe it was wormwood they threw in there. I don't know. At least a thought. So they get through the immediate crisis of not having water. And I need to remind you of something that I did tell you last week, I believe, They never actually died or threatened with thirst. They were threatened with the anticipation of thirst. They were anticipating they were going to run out of water. The farmers were anticipating the cows were going to run out of water. They didn't actually have that happen. So now I'm describing to you why Bill sits around the gym. Let's teach you to come in late. That's why Bill sits around the gym worrying, because he's anticipating Alita's going to drain their bank account. Morning. They were complaining about the anticipation of what they thought was going to happen, not what actually happened. And what's God showing them in all of this? I've got your back. I'm still here. Nothing's changed. The promises that you originally received are still intact. Focus. Focus. And that brings us to chapter 16. They start complaining about food. They're going to run out of food pretty soon. So we go through this same scenario again, and God provides. And what he does provide, and we talked about last week, was manna. We talked about what that is. And just for review, you know that manna means? You know that manna means? What is it? What is it? That's what manna means. When you say manna, you're asking the question, what is it? They kept calling it manna, and God kept calling it food from heaven. Food from heaven. And the tie was, and we keep seeing these inferences in Exodus, we have another object that's called food from heaven. Jesus Christ. There are ties all over Exodus referring to salvation. And this is just another one. Now, when God gives them the manna, it was something they'd never seen before. It would come every morning. There were instructions to pick that manna up. And we know they were told they were to pick it up and it would last for the day, because they would only gather as much as each one needed. So the old adage that the more we have, the better, the bigger your bank account is, the better, that doesn't apply here. Because if they picked up too much manna, what happened to it? It spoiled. It only lasts one day, except on Friday. Because the next day was Sabbath and they weren't allowed to pick up food, nor was there any food there for them to pick up. So on that one day, God would make an exception and say, you can pick up enough for 2 days, because you're not working on Sabbath. You're going to stay home on Sabbath. Family day. Reflection day. One of two things happened on Sabbath day that God would initiate or ask you to do, and one is, remember who God is. It was a day that you devoted or you focused on God. And the second thing was, remember what God has done for you. And if you keep that in mind, what God has done for you, you start remembering the things and stop remembering the grumbling that you were doing because God wasn't around you during the week. So maybe an antidote for you grumbling or having low points in your week is remember God and what he's done for you. And it seems like that's the theme of Sabbath. Now, Sabbath for the Jews was Saturday. Sabbath for you today is Sunday. Does it matter which day is Sabbath? Maybe Sabbath for you is Wednesday. Maybe that's your day off. This fly is about to see his Sabbath. You want to hit me? not interested in Sabbath, he's interested in funerals. Now, the Sabbath today, we don't hold in the same esteem as they did. Our society has changed. When I was a kid, most of the stores were closed on Sundays. The liquor stores were all closed until noon on Sundays. Remember that? So I couldn't get anything to drink before noon. I was only 8 or 10 years old at the time, but I guess that means something. Things have changed now. From my perspective, and you may disagree with me, it appears to me the Sabbath is pretty much business as usual. And it's been that way for a while. So apparently, when I read to you in a few minutes the 10 Commandments, which are in chapter 20, there's some of those commandments that we need to disregard and take out of our book. One of them is the Sabbath. You see, I'm setting you up. Another one says, thou shalt not steal. In fact, we'll go through the rest of them in a minute. I think there's still one in there somewhere that talks about honoring your mother and your father. We'll talk about that in a minute. When the people were complaining about Moses leading them into the desert to die, one of the things they said, in fact, let's go to that. It's in chapter 16, verse 3. The Israelites said to them, if we'd only died by the Lord's hand in Egypt, there we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into the desert to starve this entire assembly to death. These people are complaining about where they are now compared to where they came from in Egypt. And as I told you last week, it would seem not quite accurate. They had selective memory, did they not? Remember working like dogs with no were beat. They worked all. They were the slave labor force. They were praying to God, and they couldn't wait to get out of there. Now all of a sudden, they're questioning whether they should have gone at all. It seems like that when people complain, they have selective memory, trying to make their own point, and they seem to like to blame the leaders. It's your fault we're here, Brian. You did a lousy job. Whatever you did, you're going to leave us out here, abandon us, and we're going to die in the desert. You know, you're talking about a couple of million people while we're discussing this. Yeah. This isn't a camp of 50 sitting around. How did they even set up? Oh, you know, we could discuss that sometime, but basically their regiment system was so good that they had, as soon as they got a mobile church, the synagogue, and I don't want to get off into this today, they had assigned places in relation to the synagogue, the mobile church, the tent. You're on the west side, you're on the east side, you're on the north, the south, etc. And it was always that way. When they marched, it was in a certain procession and order. It was always that way. So that when you're sitting on a hill watching this group go through your country, you could see there was something different about them. If no other reason, the way they moved was different. They were so well organized that it could happen in a couple of hours, setting up tent. And they were always in relation to that mobile church, that tent church. That was all orchestrated. That's how they could do that. And that's also how you could sit on a hill, and if nothing else impressed you, they were organized. That's how that happened. God's feeding them now on a morning basis, 6 days a week. There were rules for them to pick up the food. What were those rules? You could only pick up as much as you needed. So I couldn't go and be the tallest and designate, invent a machine, and pick up manna for everyone. You had to do it yourself. And you were only allowed to pick up as much as you could consume that day, except for Saturday. And if you abused the rules, if you ignored the rules, what you had extra was going to rot anyway. They complained. We're tired of eating just bread. And they had music to complain to. So God gave them meat at night in the form of quail. And as I reminded you, I read something in Jewish tradition where Josephus was talking about the manna and how it would have been such a boring thing to eat bread every day for 40 years. And the tradition was those guys would think of some favorite food they liked and it would taste like that. So they may be eating manna, but it might taste like beef stroganoff, bacon and eggs. It could be different every day. I could tolerate that for 40 years, as long as it doesn't taste the same. And I don't. As long as it doesn't move too much, I'm okay. Getting through this, and that brings us to chapter 17. The whole assembly, or the whole Israelite community, set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink, so they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Gosh, I think I just read this story. Oh, wait a minute. This is again. They haven't learned anything, have they? They keep doing the same things over and over again, and they don't see the damage that it's doing to them. Moses responds and says, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why don't you put the Lord to the test?" Verse 3, the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses, and they said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" And Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." They lose faith quickly. And it doesn't take too much or too long. What are they lacking here? One of the things we're lacking here is a voice. What are they lacking here? Huh? Trust, faith, obedience. And how is that affecting them? They don't seem to have a real close relationship with God. And they want to blame Moses. And you notice they always put Moses between themselves and God. The Lord answered Moses and says, "Go out in front of the people, take some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go." Notice something. God is not telling Moses take that staff and start beating them Israelites. He's not telling them, hold that staff up and we'll kill a few thousand of them. And that'll get everybody else's attention. You don't hear retribution coming back from God. He tells them how to fix the problem. He tells Moses, go, and I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink. So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. And he called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled, and because they tested the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? Is the Lord among us or not? What a thing to say after what they had witnessed. What do you have to see or experience to be convinced that God is with you? Apparently, what they had experienced to this point was not enough. They had a pillar of fire during the night, a pillar of cloud during the day, a leader that God sent them, standing in front of them, telling them that his message was coming right out of the mouth of God. They saw the Red Sea. They saw what happened before with water. They saw them be rescued out of Egypt and plunder Egypt. And they asked, is the Lord among us or not? One of the things that I think you can take away from this is apparently the physical things that they see and experience don't build their faith. The Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim, and Moses said to Joshua, choose some of the men out of the men and go and fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my Amalekites, as Moses had ordered. And Moses and Aaron and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites are winning, and whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him and set him on it, and Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one of side and one on the other, so that his hands remained steady until sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. Let's stop there for a second, and I want to show you something that I found by accident this week. The Amalekites let me find it here. I forgot his name. Amalek is the leader of the Amalekites. Amalek. You know who he was? Esau's grandson. Did you know that, Bill? This is related to the tribe they're fighting. These are cousins. Is that weird? This is Esau's grandson. And if we read this story, Brian, they attacked him from behind. They were cowards. You don't do that. That was not part of war etiquette in those days. And it made them look bad when they got beat, but it made them look bad also because they attacked them from behind. Cousins. Well, if you want to remove this story a couple of thousand years, and of course the generations have multiplied past that, I don't know how long you want to follow that family line, they're still cousins. Palestinians, the Jews, are still distantly related. Still fighting over the same land. Gosh, it sounds like we're just repeating the story again and again and again. The Amalekites are defeated. And Moses shows the people, God will help you when you ask. Then the Lord said to Moses in verse 14, write this on a scroll as something to be remembered, and make sure that Joshua hears it, because I will completely blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven. Moses built an altar and called it, the Lord is my banner. He said, because hands were lifted up against the throne of the Lord, and the Lord will be at war against the Amalekites from generation to generation. That's their first battle that they fought. Now, I want to skip 18 because 18 sets up a new law system for Moses, which he desperately needs. And I need to get over to chapter 19. On the first day of the third month, 3 months into this journey now, first day, after the Israelites left Egypt on that very day, they came to the desert of Sinai. After they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. That mountain they're speaking about is Sinai, thank you. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called him from the mountain and said, this is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob. Notice they're not the descendants of Israel. They're the descendants of Jacob. And what you are to tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did in Egypt. Here he goes, repeating and reminding them of what he's been doing for them all up to here. And how I carried you on wings of eagles and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them, commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, listen to this, we will do everything the Lord has said. So Moses brought their answer back to God. That is a great answer that they don't seem to put into practice. So, let me just read it. And the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and concentrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready for the third day, because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai and in the sight of my people. Put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, be careful that you do not approach the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain is to be put to death. They are to be stoned or shot with arrows. Not a hand is to be laid on them. No person or animal shall be permitted to live. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast that may approach the mountain. After Moses had gone down the mountain to the people, he consecrated them and washed their clothes. And then he said to the people, prepare yourselves for the third day, abstain from sexual relations. On the morning of the third day, there was thunder, lightning, with a thick cloud over the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast, and everyone in the camp trembled. Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke, because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from like smoke from a furnace, and the whole monument trembled violently. As the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. And the Lord descended to the top of the Mount Sinai and called Moses to. So Moses went up, and the Lord said to him, "Go down and warn the people, so they do not force their way through to see the Lord." And many of them perished. Even the priests who approach the Lord must consecrate themselves, or one of the Lord will break out against them. Something very eventful is going to happen. The people are going to meet God. They have to spend 2 days cleaning up and getting ready for this. And God is showing them they need to be sanctified, cleansed. Not only physically, spiritually. They have to get ready for a meeting with God. And God is going to do something so tremendously physical that it's going to scare them to death. It says they were trembling. I don't even think you can picture this mountain with this smoke, these clouds, this fire, this lightning. God is making a statement here. He said, I'm going to show you something that'll shake you to your core. Because this is who I am. And this is who you're grumbling against. Maybe you'll think next time before you open your mouth. You're dealing with something that you have no concept of how powerful this is. So Moses goes up on the hill as he's called, and he spends 40 days up there. And he comes back in his hand with a set of stones, 2 stones. And of course, these are the 10 Commandments. Notice something. The people hear God's words themselves as he starts to speak. And it scares them so bad that they make a request to Moses and tell Moses, you do the talking for us to God. We're going to die if we hear something like that again. They thought they were going to die. You talk about the fear of God, it appears that'll do it. Now the people agree to a covenant, and notice something. We go to chapter 20, verse number 1. And God spoke these words. Here's the 10 Commandments. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt and out of the land of slavery. You need to remember who I am. As a matter of fact, Tammy, you need to remember it so well, I'm going to put it in writing. So you can read that every morning, and you can remember who you're dealing with. Now, I don't have the 10 Commandments with me this morning. Oh, wait a minute. I do. I just read the first one. And if I have that kind of access to God's commandments this morning, Reuben, so do you. So I can read that. If nothing else this morning, I can remember, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt and out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall have no other gods before me. Well, he could obviously say that to these Israelites because until just recently, they were surrounded by countries and people with other gods before them. God has personally led them into Sinai, away from everybody, to get them away from all these influences that they have, so they're not distracted anymore. And then he tells them, you will not have any other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven, above or on the earth, or beneath the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord, am your God. Gosh, it sounds like we've heard that before. And I'm a jealous God, punishing the children for their sin and their parents to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Now, the next one we have torn completely out of our Bible, and I should tear this page out of mine, because we don't believe this anymore. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Well, that doesn't fit our society today. It doesn't fit half the people in the gym this morning. It doesn't fit anybody that's making movies this morning, because we don't care about that anymore. And listen to how quiet it is. You see, we have changed the meaning or the understanding of some of the Ten Commandments. They don't mean what they used to. That was for then. This is for now. Right, Carlos? Awful quiet this morning. Oh, what about the next one? We need to get rid of that one too. Remember the Sabbath day. Keeping it holy. 6 days you shall work and do your work, but on the Sabbath day is Sabbath to the Lord your God. That means you're setting it apart. On it you shall not do any work, neither you or your sons or daughters. Kids, you're off scot-free today. See? You see? What do we do with that? Number 12. Honor your father and mother. Well, we don't hear that. So that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. A lot of honor needed here. You shall not commit murder. You shall not commit adultery. And you shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. And you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You don't covet their neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, or his donkey, or his car, or his Corvette, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. Let me remind you of something that you probably know when it's talking about coveting. That doesn't begin physically. That begins mentally. You have to be thinking about it to covet it. And that gets transferred from here to here. And now you're wanting to do something that had its original idea here. What's Jesus? What's God talking about? Controlling your thoughts? Renewing your mind? Gosh, it seems like we've heard some of this before. The stuff that God is telling these people, half of them deal with a vertical relationship with God. The other half deal with a horizontal relationship with your neighbor. He's teaching you how to live with each other. He's also teaching you how to live with God. And they clearly need teaching on how to live with God, because every time something comes up, they don't go pray. Either they go complain to Moses. Moses has turned out to be a good whipping boy for the Jews. Just go find him and unload on him. He'll go talk to God, and they'll come up with an answer. That seems to be how it seems to be working. Now, I read something the other day that I'm going to share with you. You may or may not believe this, and it's okay either way. The Ten Commandments were written on 2 stones, front and back. Front and back. Double-sided. 2 of them. He's coming down from the hill, and what does he encounter as he comes out of the clouds? Well, they've already violated several of the 10 Commandments, and he hasn't even got there to them yet. They built a golden calf because Moses took too long to get back. Where did the golden calf idea come from? Egypt. That was one of their gods. They've gone back to what they used to do. Even more important, where did they get the gold and jewels to build the calf? From where they stole them from the Egyptians. They also looted Egypt on the way out, and they were loaded with plunder that God gave them, and they're using God's blessing to make a golden calf. Woo! I think I'd be leaving town. That's going to get them in a lot of trouble. They're using God's provision to worship an idol on top of everything else they've done. When Moses sees that, even Moses gets mad, and what does he do? He throws the tablets down and breaks them. God says, we don't need to write another one, these stinking people. We'll just start again with you. Wait a minute. He goes back up the hill and gets a second set. Again, written on front and back. Here's the controversy came in that I never heard before, and it may or may not be true. When God makes this covenant with these people that's written in stone, by the way, and it's to be saved forever, you know where it went. Eventually it ends up in the Ark of the Covenant. But it's written on 2 sides. Did God write so big that it took 4 sides of stone to write these down? Perhaps not. Perhaps 1 stone was the 10 Commandments on both sides. Perhaps the second stone, which the Bible says that Moses had gone to them and went back up the mountain and told God what the response of the Israelites was their response to the contract. Perhaps the second stone was their response to what God offered. Because that's the way a contract is made, is both sides. They had agreed to those 10 Commandments. They said they agreed to them. God wrote it down. He wrote their response down. So not only can they remember what God's commandments were, they can remember their response. Something to think about. The people agreed to the covenant. And God kept repeating to them, I am the Lord your God. We read it in chapter 20, verse 2, and we read it throughout the Bible. Yeah. I'm in Exodus chapter 20, verse number 2. Sure. Exodus 20. Right.
Because when you transfer from Hebrew to English, it loses, kind of like when you say things in Spanish, it means a lot more.
You're right. Now I got to leave you with one more thing, and I'm going to do it in 1 minute, Art. I need 1 minute.
You got it, I guess.
Thank you. Following these commandments, if you can follow every one of them, gives you the ability to draw closer to God. Would you agree with that? You got to be real careful with that statement. Let me get this right. This is important. Your idea is to draw closer to God by obeying His commandments and His rules. Okay? It makes you closer to God. It makes you rely on God. It makes you more holy, more righteous. You're following His rules or attempting to. That does not build your closeness with God. That does not do it. How do you build your closeness with God? Your faith. Your faith. If I try to teach you that your works will bring you closer to God, we've already heard that story preached. Your works do not bring you closer to God. Your faith brings you closer to God. What these guys needed to do instead of complaining was they need to do just what Moses did. Go put your hands up and talk to God yourself. God has done nothing but make Himself available to you through the years. You see it over and over again here. He doesn't punish them for their grumbling. He provides for their needs. We need to realize that today. We need to stop our grumbling and we need to start our praising to God. Remember what God brought you through. That wasn't an accident. And you're here this morning not because of your grumbling to God, because of your faith in God. And I'm done.